I'm thrilled that you all are here. I mean, I started spreading the word, but I had no idea. I said, oh, maybe 40 people. I think we got like 70 or 80.
We ran out of chairs.
We ran out of chairs, and there is one over here. If somebody wants to move the computer and put it on the floor, and there's an extra chair. First, I have to thank Santa for asking me. She asked me about 4 weeks ago, and at the time I said, oh, sure, I'll come talk about the Barcus family. Not even thinking ahead, because you know me, I have to do something 100%. So I started getting into all my Aunt Sarah's boxes and finding out all this history that I didn't know and putting slides together. And then I wanted to include history of Leesburg. And the next thing I know, my husband's coming in and saying, you cannot go an hour. People will get bored. I said, oh no, I'm only going to do it 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. So then we had this bet that I can stay under 30 minutes. And so with that, I'm going to say that I'm going to go through these slides pretty quick. So if you see a slide that you think you might recognize somebody in it and you want a copy of it, just let me know afterwards and I will be glad to send it to you, because we're not going to be able to hold them up here and recognize everybody in the slide because it's going to go fast. I will say that my family came to Leesburg in 1915, and they moved into a rental house on Main Street, and Main Street was a dirt road back then. We didn't pave until the 20s, and that to me was just amazing. The house is still there, and the house across the street, which my grandfather built, is still there. And I want to get into what happened and how they got here. So, and really to start out, I have to tell you a little bit about my grandmother and my grandfather and where they came from. Now, David said for $17 you can buy one of these. So, that's me. Not so attractive. But this is a picture. This is a picture in 1973 of my grandmother's 90th birthday, and everybody who came to Leesburg to celebrate that birthday with her, and this is in 1973. So she's been gone for quite a while, but she did live to be 96 years old. This is, just real quick, that's my father, that's my mother, David, you might probably recognize him, that's me, my sister Kay. My brother David was in the Air Force at the time, and Connie, where are you?
I'm right below Kay.
Oh, there you are. Yeah, there's a lot. Okay, we're going to go back now. See if I can do this right. Nope.
I remember it.
One above that.
Above?
No, the down arrow.
I did do the down arrow.
There you go.
Oh! There we go.
Wait a minute, no.
One more,
you went
Beverly.
too far. Back.
I went too far.
Now go yeah,
There we go. Okay. See if I can do this as quickly as possible. This is my great-grandfather, my grandmother's father. He grew up in Florida. I am a fifth generation on this side of the family. His name was McAlpin. David and I were going to Live Oak because I knew my grandmother's from Live Oak, and we drive through a town called McAlpin, and we were like, this can't be a coincidence. And so we went to go to the library and found out the town is named after my great-grandfather. So he moved here, and I believe it was 1870, after the war. He was a captain in the Confederacy. He fought for the Confederacy, and so did his father. They both did. And after the war, he moved to a little area outside of Live Oak and made a little homestead there. And he did so well, he brought other families in. But after a few years, this was his original house, and this house stood there until he had a tornado and it tore it down in 1955. He moved into Live Oak and built this house because he was becoming prosperous by that time. He started the first newspaper in Live Oak. He was the first station master of the railroad. So he was a pretty prominent man. And he also was, if I can make it work, there we go. He was also in the state legislature. He was a congressman for Suwannee County. And this is my grandfather. I really should have practiced this part, shouldn't I? Okay.
Beverly, say his full name.
Okay. His name is Daniel, thank you, Connie. Daniel McAlpin Barcus. This is him right here. And one of the interesting things is right after the Civil War, in Reconstruction and stuff, blacks had a lot of opportunities that they didn't have back then. And you can notice we have a couple of black congressmen in here. And this gentleman right here with the hat, he wrote the carpetbagger laws for the state of Florida, which I found very interesting. So that was my grandfather on my my grandmother's side, my great-grandfather. Now, on my father's side, my great-grandfather's name was David Barcus, just like my father and my brother. By the way, David Barcus, my brother, stand up. He and his wife Maria. So this is what he looked like as a young man. This is what he looked like as an older man. I never knew him. He died in 1924. This picture, which is the picture over there, is a picture of David Barcus, his son, Harry, H.E., which is my grandfather, the one that moved here to Leesburg, and his wife, Sally, and his sister, Stella. And these two older ladies are the parents of my grandfather and grandmother. And they got to be good friends. All right, let's try the next one. Here is Harry and Ollie McAlpin Barcus. These are my grandparents that moved here in 1915. This is a picture of them, I think, on their wedding day. David said I wasn't going to look at these notes I made, and I think he's right. I'm moving right along. Okay. Harry, I don't know if he graduated or not, but I hear he went, or saw some information that he went to Stetson University. So I know he went there, but after he got out, he started lumber company and in the lumber business. And that was his main thing that he did until he came to Leesburg. And he somehow met my grandmother, Ann Live Oak. This is my grandmother, Ollie. And I just loved her to death. She was sweet. She died in 1980, and she lived to be 83. Oh, which reminds me, if you have a cell phone, I'm not worried about it going off, but if you might want to put it on airplane mode. But if you have a calculator on your cell phone, I want you to find it, because you're going to be doing a little project on it in a few minutes. So you need to know where the calculator is on your cell phone if you have one. Just giving you forewarning. The reason my grandparents came to Leesburg was because they built Lee School. Leesburg had a population of about 1,700 people in 1915. Oh, I'm too loud. Sorry. Yeah, I know. I was worried about people not being able to hear. Is that about good there? Okay. So Leesburg had a population of 1,700 people in 1915, but the school at the time was where Melon Patch Theater is. And so what they did was they tore down that school and built Lee School. But they didn't have Lee School more than 10 years before it was overcrowded. And they knew they had to build a high school and separate and make Lee School the elementary school. So one of the interesting stories about that is they're looking for property of where to put Lee. And there was a man named Mr. Meadows who had some property where the high school is now. And he sold them property. Now, in fact, I think he gave them the property for Leesburg High School. But what's interesting about that is that a lot of the townspeople didn't want the high school built there because they said it was too far out of town. So I thought that was kind of interesting. This is what, and I'm sorry, that was Leesburg down here. This is Leesburg in 1927, and this is Leesburg High School as it looked about, this is after 27, but this is how it looked during that time. Okay, when my family first moved to Leesburg, they moved into this house right here. They rented it. This is at 1434 West Main Street, the same place the house that is now. And they rented it for about 8 years. And when they moved there, the very first Sunday, my grandmother took my oldest aunt, Aunt Rita, and her daughter, Linda, is here. Linda, you want to raise your hand? She's here. And she took my her oldest daughter, Rita, who was 10, and she took the next two children, Sarah. I could play with this all day. That far. I need somebody to hold it that far for me.
Just a little loud, baby.
I know, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, better loud than soft.
Yeah.
Okay. So she dressed her three children that were of age and could walk to church. She dressed them in their Sunday best. She walked them across the street. At the time, she was pregnant with her fifth child, and my father was 2. So she didn't want to send my father, he was too young, and she was pregnant, and she couldn't go at the time. So she sent the 3 older children, and she walked them across the street, across Main Street to the south side of Main Street. And she told my Aunt Rita to walk them all the way down until they ran into a church. But whatever they did, do not cross the street, because you might end up at the Baptist church. And that was a sin. So she kept them, my Aunt Rita kept them on the right side of the street, and they ended up at Morrison Methodist Church. They met the preacher, and they got started in that church. I thought that was a cute story too. My Aunt Sarah told me that one. And just history. This is what Morrison Methodist Church was just called, the Leesburg Methodist Church back then. It was a wooden building, and it looked like that. It was built in 1882, and it stayed that way till 1921. And in 1921, they tore it down and built the church that most of you grew up in, that were Methodists here in town. That church then was torn down to build the new Methodist church that's there now. This is what the children look like. This is my Aunt Rita, my Uncle Harry, named after his father, Aunt Sarah, those of you that knew her can see her face there, my father, David. Here is a picture of them after Dan was born. Rita, Sarah, Harry, David, and Dan taking off. She had one other child, a daughter that was born between Rita and Sarah, but that child passed away after about 18 months. My grandfather, this is whoops, I'm just moving right along. Going the wrong way, sorry.
You're still going the wrong way.
Still going the wrong way.
Still.
No matter which way I push, it seems to go the wrong way.
No, it doesn't.
Blame David.
I will. It's always easier to blame him. Okay, here we go. All right, this is my grandfather. It's my grandfather, Harry. He's a big fisherman and hunter. Picture of him. This picture of him right here, here's Harry, and here's Rita and Sarah. This bathing suit that he's wearing right here is this bathing suit in the 20s. And it's got holes in it from where moths have been eating it. That is that bathing suit. And by the way, this bathing suit here, not the one that Rita was wearing, but it was also a 20s bathing suit. It even has pantaloons underneath. And this was worn by my Aunt Rita in the late 20s. Bathing suits have changed a little. Here is my father, David, his brother, Dan, Rita, the oldest, my Aunt Sarah, and my Uncle Harry. All right. In 1923, my grandfather remodeled the house, and this is what it looked like in 1923, pretty much what it looks like today. This was a picture that was taken in 1950, still pretty much what it looks like today. Across the street, my grandfather built this house for his parents in their elder years. He built it in 23 also. And they moved into it. This was David and Sally, thank you. David and Sally moved into this house, but 1 year later, David died in 1924. But Sally stayed on to live in it. This is Sally right here. She stayed on to live in that house until 1944 when she died. And she was really good with taking care of the kids and helping out and everything. And she used to do things for the war effort. She was big into that during the war. When Harry moved to Leesburg, he was into the lumber business. So these are some trees that I just thought were unbelievable, that they used to have trees like that. They're called monarch giant oaks. And he started a lumber factory. This is him right here. This is my grandfather, Harry. He has a young man standing by this giant oak. He started a mill, and this is a mill he had right outside of Leesburg. And this is one of the things I found very interesting. This is a certificate, a stock certificate for Barcus Lumber Company. And if you want one, I can sell you one for $100. I found a bunch of them. One other thing. after he did the lumber business, my grandfather got into several other things. He bought some property out in Okahonka, about 150 acres or so, and on that property he planted 35 acres of Parson Brown oranges. I don't know if you remember that brand particularly, but it was a really sweet orange that was grown on a sour root, and so he did real well with that. But then he started growing watermelons, and that's where he made a bunch of money growing watermelons, and he became one of the largest growers and shippers of watermelons in the Leesburg area. And as a matter of fact, we started watermelon season, or watermelon festivals, right around that time too. In 1930, the watermelon festival started. And one of the things that I discovered while I was doing that, I saw some Venables here, was the first watermelon queen was your great-grandmother? Your mother. Okay, it was Jeff's mother. And what was her maiden name? Wit, that's it. I'm sorry. I couldn't remember everything. But I said, oh my gosh, I know Venable. And that was Jeff's mother, was the first watermelon queen back in 1930, I guess was the year, which I thought was really interesting. He also started a moss factory. This was right across the street from A.S. Hurlon's Packing Company on 3rd Street, right by the railroad track. And he and a man named Murphy started this company together. And what you did was is you could go out and collect moss, and you had to dry it yourself up to a month. And then you could take it to his factory, and they would process it, and they would pack it, and they would ship it off. And you could make up to 4 cents a pound on your moss that you collected. I don't know how long that lasted. They used it in a lot of automobiles. I know that because he shipped a lot of it up north for automobiles for their upholstery. But they also used it in upholstery just locally, and also in bedding. I can't even imagine, but moss. I found this picture, and this is my dad and 4 other young boys in 1924 pretending to dive, but obviously they're not. I think that I was told that this is Louis McIrvin. Rosemary is here. But Rosemary said she didn't really recognize that as her father, but I know my Aunt Sarah said, oh, that's Louis McIrvin. So I don't know if that's Louis or if that's Louis. I know that's my dad. But they were all going swimming together out here on Lake Harris. And at the time, Lake Harris was just a swamp. So, I guess that one dock must have been the only dock there. And then this is another picture I found of commercial paper carriers. This is my dad, and this is his brother Harry, and then there's some other young men during the time that were paper carriers when they were boys here. I hope I'm not forgetting any of these really great things I was going to show you, because I've got a bunch of stuff to show. No, I don't think so. I think I'm doing okay. All right, I found this picture of Lee School, and you can recognize these as the steps of Lee School. This is my father. This is his brother, Harry. You may look in here and may know somebody in here. My dad graduated in 31, and my Uncle Harry graduated in 29, I believe. And so if you had parents or grandparents that graduated during that time during Leesburg High School, I would love to know it if they're in this picture. And I'll be glad to send it to you, because those are the only 2 people I have that are identified. Here's another school picture. This is 1927. This was my Uncle Dan in the picture, and once again, I don't know who any of the other people are, but you're certainly welcome to look through it, or if you think you know anybody, Meredith's looking really hard because she might know somebody. I'd love to be able to identify some more. This was the band in 1927, and I found the trumpet my father played. This is my dad. But he was young then, so I don't know how old he graduated in 31, so he would have been in like 9th grade or something then. But that's the Leesburg band. Now this one has a lot of people you're going to recognize. This is the Leesburg High School football team in 1930. Let me point out a few people you might know. This was Coach Banning. He had a record for really winning. But this one, a lot of you are going to recognize. That is Ray Hayes. He is the assistant coach. Here's another one you might recognize, John. This is Burton Brown, Julie's father. He was the manager of the team. This is my father. He was the quarterback. This is Byron Herlong, Ralph Polk, Bill and Jim Polk's father, right here. And this little guy in the back, that's George Miller. And George Miller is Ronnie Young's wife's father. And he became a very good football player. He didn't play on this team because he was too young, but I just think that's really interesting. I have the picture up here with most of the names on the back of these players. They never lost a game.
You might add that he eventually went to play with the Chicago Bears.
I didn't know that. That's great. Did he play college too, or did he go straight to the Bears?
He's got every rushing record at Rollins College.
Rollins College. Wow. Well, I knew he was a really good football player. So this is George right here. I guess he really grew up, huh? That's amazing. Just a little kid here.
After Rollins, they found out that those guys 6'2" that weighed 240 were as fast as he was.
Yeah. Even back then, it was a rough sport, huh? Okay, so I do want to show you one thing. This is my father's jersey, his junior year at Leesburg High School. It's kind of ragged, got a lot of holes in it from the moss getting a hold of it. But that's the jersey he had. My dad used to tell me that he played football for 3 years and they never lost a game. And I said, yeah, right. But then I found out that, sure enough, Leesburg did not lose a game these 2 years. Yeah, we just thought, maybe this is just a made-up story. The basketball team didn't do as well. This is the basketball team. Skipping ahead. This is my dad. This is Byron Herlong. Over here's Ray Hayes again, assistant coach. My dad, Byron. I don't know if you would know any of the other gentlemen that are in here, and of course that's Coach Banning. You know Banning Park in Tavares? That's named after Coach Banning. He was a very, very popular and famous coach in the area. I'm sorry, who? What? Your mother's father. Wow, that's amazing. So did you recognize these pictures of him? He was really well loved. Lots of nice articles about him. Okay, moving on. It's the Depression. There are no yearbooks at Leesburg High School from 1930. There was a 1929, but there was no yearbooks from 1930 until the early 40s when the war started. So the pictures that I have, like these pictures of the football team and stuff, were just individual pictures. They weren't taken from any yearbooks because there weren't any. However, it made it really difficult for people to go to college. They'd take you. It's not like getting into the University of Florida today where you have to be straight A student and everything. But if you had the money, you could go. Basically was it. So this is a fraternity picture of my dad's fraternity, Pi Kappa Phi. And in this picture is my dad, and right next to him, Jess Dooley. We have two Dooley girls here today, too, Sarah and Mary Lou. And their father was on the baseball team, and he was quite a good baseball player. This is a picture of Byron was also on the team in the fraternity, and this is a picture of my dad, and this is my picture of my dad graduating from University of Florida. It seems like there was something I was going to tell you about that. Oh yes. This. Can't believe it. I guess it's wrong.
Don't rip it.
This freshman at the University of Florida had to wear a rat hat. This is my father's rat hat. And my father wasn't big enough to play football at the University of Florida. I think Byron did, but they had a freshman team. And the freshman team would play the varsity, scrimmage with varsity, but the freshman team would also play the freshmen from all the other colleges. And on this cap are all the schools that Pi Kappa Phi Rat Barcus from Leesburg, Florida played in. And all the schools that he played in, that they played, and the score. Like the Georgia Rats scored 10, the Florida Rats scored 19. And all of the scores are on here. And guess what? Florida won all their games. The Rats at Florida won all their games. So my father was telling the truth when he said he never lost a football game. I couldn't believe it. Okay. Okay, let me make sure I'm not skipping anything here. After my dad graduated, nobody could get a job. It was the Depression. He said people graduated with engineering degrees were lucky to get a meter reader job at a city. And somehow my dad got some kind of job, I don't know what it was, in Jacksonville. And he lived in Jacksonville for a while, but then he moved back to Leesburg, and he started Barmac Fruit Company. Barmac Fruit Company was a mixture of my dad, David Barcus, and Louis McIrvin, his good friend from school. And Rosemary's here, Rosemary McIrvin. She's one of my classmates. This is her father. So Barmac stood for Barcus and McIrvin. They had a fruit company, and I found some citrus labels. These were orange labels, and this politically incorrect picture was on a watermelon. So, and they're small. So these were they packed these onto watermelons. And he owned this company. They started in 1938, but in 1940, was Elaine born in 40? Rosie? 38. Elaine was born in 38? Well, after a couple of years, they were just barely making money, and Mr. McIrvin said, I can't do this anymore because I've got a child and I've got to go home. And so my dad was trying to do it by himself, but then the war came. And when the war came, he had to go, and so the citrus packing business stayed vacant basically for a few years. So during the war, they shut it down. So it was only open for a few years, but he was given it a shot anyway. So this is a picture of Sarah, my dad, just before the war. This is my mother and father just before they got married before the war. They met at a dance at Fort Benning. Mother was working there, and my dad brought her home, and they got married before he went off to war. And then this is my grandmother saying goodbye to my father while he was going off to war. This is my dad in Paris. Now, he was so lucky. I mean, I know a lot of people, their fathers fought in Battle of the Bulge and all that. My father was an infantryman, and he happened, D-Day was June 6, 1944. So around June 1st, 1944, my mother gets a collect phone call and says, we have a collect phone call from David Barcus. Will you accept the charges? And she said, yes, of course. So Dad gets on the phone and he says, Sylvia, I can't tell you where I am. She started laughing because the operator just said Boston. So she knew where he was, but he said, we're getting ready to ship out. And so she knew that like the 1st of January, he was shipping out. So when D-Day happened on June 6th, she knew he could not have been in the first wave. He could not have gotten there in 5 days. So she was relieved to know that he wasn't in that first wave of people that went on to Normandy. He was, after they cleaned that up, he was right behind them. And by the time he got to Paris, they were there, they were still partying, flags out the window, everybody was having a good time. This woman right here, the reason I have her picture, and her name was Georgette Simonceau. She was a French woman that started dating my father's roommate, and they became good friends. And I've got to show you this. This is the flag that she made and flew out the window in Paris when the Americans came. And she gave it to my father as a memento. So this is that flag from 1944 when we made it back.
Victory Day.
Victory, yes. And see, there's something else I have. Oh, just the bottom. So let me tell you this story first. I know I'm going to go over 20 minutes.
Yeah, you're going over 30.
Okay. If you get really bored, I will not be offended if you walk out. Okay. So what happened is my father comes into Paris, and they've already sent the troops on, pushing the Germans back. And my father was fortunate enough to have a college degree, and so they said, and he was an officer, they said, we need people to stay in Paris and be military police and go to the front lines, gather prisoners, and bring them back. So Dad raised his hand. So he spent the whole war in Paris, and so he never had to fight. But what was really nice about that was when they caught German prisoners of war, and they bring them in, they were so happy to be caught. They weren't Nazis. They were made to fight. They didn't want to be fighting. Now they have 3 square meals a day. Nobody's shooting at them. The Americans are being nice to them. So Dad made a lot of German friends. And one of the friends that he made was a woodworker. And he said, if you'll give me a knife and a block of wood, I'll make you a box. He made my father this box. And I wish I had the name and the name of the family. I'd love to contact them and tell them. But I thought that was great. The other really cool thing that happened, and I'm wearing it, is another one of the German prisoners of war. I'll just pass it around if y'all want to look at it. This is a ring made out of a silver quarter. So you'd have to use a quarter made before 64 or whatever. And he taught my father how to make these rings. You can make them out of any kind of silver coin. My father taught me how to make them. And the way it works is you hit the coin on the outside and it flattens it. And as it flattens it, the inscription around the edge of the coin moves inside. So on that ring, inside it says, "In God We Trust, United States of America," and it has the year. So when my younger daughter, Allison, got married, she said, "Mom, I would love for you to make Jay, her husband, and me our rings." So I made Jay a ring out of a $50, representing his parents from the time they were born, and I made her, David and I were born in 49, I got a 49 quarter and made her wedding band out of a quarter. So I'll let that pass around,
Beverly.
y'all can look in it. Oh, and Connie has one. What
Yeah.
year's yours, Connie?
I don't know, but it's my wedding band that Dad made. But
You-
obviously he died when I was 11, but it's
Yeah.
I use it as my wedding band.
Oh, okay, well, Connie, yeah, Connie was only 11 when our dad passed away, but she's saying that one of the rings he made, she used as her wedding band. So she's got that wedding band too.
And Cameron wants one, so you better start working on one.
Connie has a daughter who's 25?
7.
7, oh my gosh. Anyway, tell her I will make her one when she gets married.
Okay.
She can have a wedding band made out of
Okay.
quarter. It's a cheap way to get a wedding band too.
Yeah.
But they're nice and they're silver. So, I think I forgot to tell you all something I wanted to tell you. Oh, this is just an aside, but I'm 5th grade now, and I'm going to Leesburg High School, not Leesburg Elementary School, Lee School, and I'm in the 5th grade. And my teacher's name is Mrs. Davis. And Mrs. Davis says to me, "Beverly Barcus." And I said, "Yes," and she's an old lady. She said, "Is your father David Barcus?" And I said, "He sure is." She said, "I had him my first year of teaching."
Oh, wow.
I had her last year of teaching.
Wow.
So my 5th grade teacher was my father's 5th grade teacher. I thought that was kind of
That is
interesting
cool.
too. Let's see. This is a picture of my mom, of course. And then she sent that to my dad while he was in the service. And that's a picture of Dad on the Champs-Élysées in France. He was so fortunate. Okay, I do not know what I did. I went down. Okay. This was just an exhibit that they had at the Moat Morris house. I put some of my dad's stuff, and I just threw it in there because I had it. We'll go past that. Some of the stuff he had during World War II. All right, I have a slide for each of the children. This is Rita, the oldest. And some of you may recognize some of these teachers in this picture. I don't know all of them, but some of the names, I'll just read them out to you. We have Mrs. Bigham. We have Mrs. Cheeseman. Mrs. Weed. You may have had some.
Oh, yeah.
My Aunt Rita is seated on the far end here. This is my Aunt Rita.
I had Mrs. Weed.
We have Mrs. Dempsey, Mrs. Alt, Mrs. Suckus, and the principal was Mr. Hufford, and I remember being scared to death of him. And then we had Frances Jones. Y'all remember Mrs. Jones, Candace's mother, and Emily Barano. And there was just quite a few teachers at Lee School during the time. My Aunt Rita married Howard Bozeman. This is Howard. This is my Aunt Rita. This is Linda when she was a teenager. My cousin Bill Bozeman and my cousin Howard
She
Bozeman.
gotta figure it out.
Bill lived in Tampa. Linda moved around but moved back here. And then this is Rita on her wedding day. My Aunt Sarah was a bridesmaid. And then another cousin from Live Oak was a bridesmaid. And you can see that this picture was taken in front of the house because you recognize the window in the background. And by the way, I forgot to tell you that my mother and father got married in Morrison Methodist Church, and they had their reception in this same house on Main Street. So it's got a lot of history. The next child was Harry. Uncle Harry, I'm sorry, this is my Uncle Harry and my Aunt Isabel Morrison. They had two children, Ray and Carol. This is a picture of them when they were younger in high school. This is a picture of them standing in front of the house across the street that was built for my great-grandparents. They lived in that house in the 50s while they were building their house in Palmore Park. And then this is a picture, I think, of their wedding day of Isabel and Harry. Harry, when he graduated from high school, his father said, you know, I'll put you through school or I'll give you a fernery, because he had a fernery. And my uncle said, I'll take the fernery. So he was in the fernery business. He did that. And my Aunt Isabel, I remember her being the organ player at Methodist Church, and also she worked at Minute Maid when Minute Maid was here in Leesburg. Which reminds me of something else. But now I forgot it because it's like that. It goes that fast. It was about, oh well, it'll come back. Okay, this is the youngest, Dan. Dan married Isabel Byers of the Byers family.
Ruth Jane,
Byers.
Ruth Jane, Ruth Jane.
I'm sorry. Ruth Jane. Listen to me, that was Isabel Morrison. This is Ruth Jane Byers. Thank you, Connie. He married Ruth Jane Byers, and they moved to St. Petersburg, where he got a job working for the IRS. So we never really got to see Dan very much, but he had a daughter named Barbara, who is my age, and Tom Brooks, you remember her. She would come to visit me, and Tom would get her a date with some lucky guy in Leesburg to go out, and my cousin Dan. And then this is my cousin Sue. I couldn't get any more recent pictures of her, but this was a picture of her when she was young. This is a picture taken in 1958 of the family reunion at the time. Just real quickly, that's me, my brother David. This is my younger sister, Kay. Kay's not here, she lives in Virginia. So my sister Connie wasn't born yet. This is Linda, who's here. My dad, Aunt Sarah, those of you that knew Sarah, Aunt Rita, and the rest of the Barcus family. Here's my cousin Bray. Here's my mom. And this is just a picture of the children. So this is Ollie McAlpin, whose father was the congressman. There we go, that's Ollie. This is Dan, Sarah, my dad, Rita, and Harry. So this is her children that you saw in the previous picture where they were young and Dan was running away. This is them grown up. Okay, I'm going to talk about my Aunt Sarah. My Aunt Sarah, what a jewel. Well, first of all, let's just say that you can look and see what a fun life she had. I don't know if any of y'all remember Lucy K. Miller. Lucy K. Miller was the first home economics teacher at Leesburg High School. My Aunt Sarah had her. These ladies did some kind of performance. I think Sarah's in here on this end. But this is the house next door to my Aunt Sarah's house, and Lucy K. Miller lived there. That house got moved when they built the church, but I mean, it's on a side street now. But I just thought that was an interesting picture. This is back in the 20s of her home ec class. When we had the centennial, my Aunt Sarah was a Keystone Cop. She also dressed up in an old period costume. And by the way, talking about old period costumes, these shoes right here are shoes that belong to my grandmother. And they're these button-up shoes that are sitting up here now. And my grandmother had a sister that died in 1905. And my grandmother had this dress, and she didn't have anything appropriate to wear to the funeral and for mourning. So this dress was a floral print, a pale floral print, and she dyed it black so that she could wear it to her sister's funeral. I think her sister was like 23 or something. So she wore that dress then. And this is my grandmother, Ollie. And these shoes were bought here in Leesburg at a shoe store downtown, and sometime in the early 1900s. I know it's hard to believe, isn't it? Let's see, I think I got all those. Frog Log, y'all know Frog Log, right? Everybody knows Frog Log. Well, this is a picture of Frog Log. This is Emmett Peter, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Here we go. This is Emmett Peter Senior. I think their middle name was Blackshear. Emmett Blackshear Peter? I'm not sure. But this is Pete Peters, who passed away recently, our friend. This is his grandfather. Not his father that was the editor of the paper here, but his father's father. And this is my Aunt Sarah. And I don't know who any of the other weddings are, but this is Frog Law back in, I don't know, the teens, in the 19-teens. Real quick story about Frog Law, I just think you might want to know. It was a station. It was a railroad station, someplace in Georgia, and this Mr. Peters, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. This Mr. Peters bought it and had it shipped down to Leesburg by way of water. And it made it all the way here, and he put it out there at Sunnyside. It's still there now. So if you ever want to go out there, it's just real interesting to see that. I know one thing I wanted to tell you. When my grandfather David came here, there were no railroads in Florida. So he came from Ohio, David Barcus, great-grandfather. And so what they did was they took a train to Jacksonville. You could get a train to Jacksonville, but there were no trains after that. Then they got a boat and went on the Ocklawaha River to Silver Springs. And then when they got off the boat in Silver Springs, they got a horse and cart and drove it to Citra, Florida, if y'all know where that is. So that's where they grew up and lived, and that's where my great-grandfather lived for many years before he moved to Leesburg and then died the next year. Okay, City Hall. I've got to tell you about City Hall. City Hall was built in 1930. My Aunt Sarah went to work at City Hall in 1936. She told me a couple of interesting stories. This story wasn't told by her, but evidently when she first went to work there after she'd gotten out of school at Florida State College for Women, she bought some skates, and she would skate down Main Street to work every day. And all the people in the shops would wave to her as she scooted by on her way to work. And I thought that was really funny that she was bringing skates to work. Well, she told me that at the time, and I remember this, and some of you may too, that the jail and the fire station were both at the bottom of City Hall. And the prisoners were kept there, and the police station was also there. Well, Buddy Stevens was the fire chief during part of this time. And evidently he was a really good cook. He cooked for the police department, and for the fire department, and for the prisoners. Now, while he's cooking, all these fumes are coming up into the City Hall, and Aunt Sarah smelled them, so she said she would sneak downstairs and get a bite of Buddy Stevens' food that he was cooking there at the City Hall. I thought that was kind of cute. My Aunt Sarah worked at the City Hall for 39 years. She didn't make it to 40 because she lived with her mother and took care of her, and her mother became ill and she needed to retire. When she retired, they had this stool for her because she was so short. She was 4'10", and she could not see over the counter in the clerk's office. So she would stand on this stool to take money in and pay their bills. And when she retired, they put this on the top of it and gave it to her. I've been using this stool in our bar. So when our grandchildren come over and they want to play bartender, they can get up on the stool and serve people drinks. Okay, moving on. Oh, okay, let's see. Did I have any more about... Well, it was just interesting about the City Hall. Let me show you this picture. This is a picture that was taken in 1958 of the City Hall employees. There's a lot of people in this picture you may recognize too. The names are underneath here. This is R.K. Evans, who his daughter Cheryl is here. Cheryl, where are you? She's in the back there. And R.K. was the clerk of the court, and my Aunt Sarah worked under him. She was like the assistant clerk of the court. This is Pat Thomas. Pat Thomas Field. That's Pat Thomas. I can't remember everybody that's in here. Oh, the Hornstra, I think that is John Hornstra's mother?
I believe that.
Yeah. Myrtle Patterson was our next door neighbor. That's her. There's a bunch of people in here that you can come up and look at the names, but if you're interested in a copy of this picture, I'll be glad to get it for you.
Stivender on the
Oh, forgot Stivender. How can I forget Stivender? This is Frank's uncle. And this was his house that this picnic was. And you can tell it's the 50s because look, there's a hula hoop.
Beverly.
I got a quick story, quick.
Okay,
No.
you want to tell it?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, my cousin Linda wants to tell a story.
I just wanted to tell you one story about City Hall. When Sarah knew she was going to retire, there were a couple of very young girls that were working at City Hall. She was training them and stuff. And she would go home to eat at my grandmother's house and then come back to work. And if she got tired, she would lay down in the car with the door open for about 10 minutes, and then she'd wake up and she was fine to go back to work. But when she did that one day, she noticed these two girls were just throwing away tons and tons of stuff. And she went out on her break to see what in the world that stuff was, and she retrieved the city charter.
I had forgotten about that story. Yeah, it was the original city charter she saved from getting thrown away. Yeah, that was very fortunate. Okay, back in the 20s, all of this area that we're in right now is a swamp. And there were people that would come from up north to get into Florida for the summer, just like they did today. They built 12 tourist houses where the old community building used to be on Dixie Avenue. Y'all remember the old community building before they built the new one? They built 12 of these tourist houses on the lake. It was a swamp in the lake, but it was great for fishing and people would come. They had windows on 4 sides for ventilation. There was a little kitchen inside and a little bathroom, and people would come and pay money. My grandfather built a couple of these. These tourist houses stayed in place until the 30s, when the WPA came in and decided they were going to dredge up Venetian Gardens and make this beautiful area out here. They had to get rid of the tourist houses. So my grandfather got 2 of them back. One of them he put at 1434 West Main Street, which is where my Aunt Sarah lived and my father grew up. And one of them they put behind the house across the street, where my great-grandparents lived for a little while. The houses are all gone now. This was the last one. This was taken I think in the 80s or 90s. David and I actually lived in that house, the same house that my great-grandparents lived in. We lived there for a couple of years while we were building our house in Palmore Park. And that shed was there then, and that was in the early, mid-70s. So we had tourist houses, kind of cool. Well, this is just a picture of my Aunt Sarah at the Melon Patch Theater. She was one of the founding fathers of the Melon Patch Theater, and she loved acting, and she loved anything to do with the theater. In fact, that was her major in college, if you can believe it.
Chautauqua.
Yes, can you remember the name of that? Say that.
Her major was Chautauqua, and it went out when vaudeville went out, so she had to change her major, and they didn't have enough money to send her to school another year, so she came to Leesburg.
Okay, well, what it was a traveling group that entertained children. She loved children, so.
It's coming back.
Yeah. So this was the last play that I remember seeing her doing a leading role in. She still continued to do plays after this, but after she passed away, you know how they have the Oscars in Hollywood? Well, they had the Sarah Awards that they give away now. And this is a Sarah Award. This is what it looks like. And, it's hiding here. If you're lucky enough, you can win a Sarah Award for your acting here in Leesburg. So that's the Sarah Award. I've got to tell you just a little bit about some of the things Sarah did. She was a volunteer extraordinaire. She volunteered at Morrison Church, where she did a lot of things, but she was also a preschool teacher in her younger years. She volunteered at LRMC. She was a charter member of the Chamber of Commerce. She volunteered at the Welcome Station. She did the voting polling. She was a member of the Business and Professional Women's Club. She also was a volunteer and worked at the Melon Patch. So just most everything you can think of, she was involved in. And I can remember going with her to Leesburg chamber meetings, and she'd be serving them orange juice, and everybody would go through the line and get their food, and then my Aunt Sarah would give them some juice at the end. We're almost there, David.
Yeah, Scooby it up.
Okay, we're going. We're moving along. Oh, wrong way. Best laid plans. Okay, this is my family. So it was hard getting pictures. But this is David Barcus's family. My father, my mother, my brother David, myself, my sister Kay, who's not here, and my little sister Connie, who's over here at the first table.
Even though y'all told me I was adopted.
That's one of the jokes. Poor Connie, she got the brunt of everything, but I think that was David that told you that, not me.
I don't know. I looked everywhere for those adoption papers. I never did find them though.
So this is a picture of the four of us, David, myself, my sister Kay, and my sister Connie, taken fairly recently. This is a picture of my brother David and his wife Maria when they got married. I got to tell you a quick story here about this. Oh, and this is my brother David when he retired from the Air Force. My brother David, I'm very proud of him. He was the first Air Force Academy graduate from Lake County. And there he is, retired here.
Yay, day, day.
So, David and Maria were boyfriend and girlfriend in the 9th grade. And I know Ronnie Young is here. Ronnie, where are you? Oh, Ronnie. So, Ronnie, I don't think you know the story, but I didn't even know the story till later. So, David decides he's going to take Maria on a date, but he doesn't have a car. So, he decides, well, where's a cool place to take her? Well, everybody knows the Young Castle, right? The boathouse, the castle. So, David loads up a grill and hot dogs and Cokes, I don't know what all, and takes them upstairs at the top part of the castle and takes Maria on a picnic on the castle, at the top of the castle. Now, I don't know if Dr. Young ever found out about that or not. We did a lot of things in that castle. I'm sure Dr. Young probably figured it out. But I thought that was a cute story. And this is my sister Kay's family. And all I got to say about Kay is they're very prolific. You see all these babies? By the end of in 2 months, she's going to have 8 of them. 8 grandchildren, all under the age of 4. I know, it's crazy. And then this is my sister Connie's family, and I couldn't get a good picture of your family, just your family. That's me in the middle. But this is Connie's husband, Mark, Connie's daughter, Cameron, that I'm going to have to make a ring for, myself, Connie, and her son, Grant, who looks a lot like my dad in the face. So that's her family now.
Don't forget your
Don't
family.
forget the last-
Oh, my family. Oh, yeah, down here. So we had a family reunion on my mother's side. They're called the Extons, so I made these shirts. We went to the Outer Banks, so I made these shirts with the Outer Banks symbol, and I put an XTN on it for Exton. This is my daughter Erin and her husband Nick. He's a tall one. David and I. Alexander, it's a boy, long hair, I know. Sylvia, named after my mother. This is Collins, and my daughter Allison and her husband Jay. So that's the most recent picture I could find, and that picture's probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old. Now, oh wait a minute, let's see.
When was she gonna talk about the dress, do you know?
I got it, we're almost
She already
at the end,
did.
I promise.
No, the one she's got on.
Yeah,
Oh, God, I don't know.
Yeah.
Beverly, get going.
David said I should talk about this dress. When my mother passed away, we were going through her closet and stuff. This was a dress that my mother wore in the 50s. It's white eyelet lace, and I just love it.
Very
It's
pretty.
fashionable today, you know. Not her belt, but my mother was known for wearing cinch belts, so it kind of fits with it. But anyway, this is my mother's dress from the 50s. Let's see, no, just give me 1 second here. Not sure what's next.
Happy hour.
And that is, we're almost through, Connie, I promise. Okay, I just want to say one thing real quickly before I show you this next slide. A lot of you growing up in Leesburg, and especially those of all of you that grew up in Palmore Park, you remember we had such a good time. We chased mosquito trucks. We did kick the can. We played spotlight tag. We ran all over the neighborhood. Nobody locked their doors. Everybody just came in, and wherever you ended up at lunch is where you had lunch. That mother would make you lunch. So it was an unbelievable time growing up. I can remember the city didn't take care of the park like it does today, and it was grown up really high with grass between the bridges. And if we wanted to go to the city pool, they would lay down some, not 2x4s, but maybe 6x2x6s, wood across from bridge to bridge, and we would run across those planks. And as you ran across those planks, you'd hear splash, 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 because the gators were getting out of the way. It was a little scary, but gators were more afraid of us back then. But that's one of the things I remember doing. Also, my mother had a bell, and when it got to be dinner time, she would ring the bell, and everybody in the neighborhood who could hear the bell knew it was time to head home, because we were outside the whole time. And other things we did was play football down the Whetstone's yard and on the triangle. It was just a great time. John O'Kelly coined this quote, but it's so true. John's looking at me like, what am I going to say? He said, you know, growing up in Leesburg in the 50s and 60s was like being in a Norman Rockwell painting. And it's so true. It is so true. So I've got to thank you for that, John. And this is one more picture about growing up in Pelmore Park. This is my sister Connie. This is my sister Kay. These are neighborhood kids, some of the Lawares. That's Jane Hastings, if you knew her. Carrie Oldham. Quite a few of the kids, the Mahonies. David and Paul. This is Paul Buchanan. Where are you, Paul? Fess up. Yeah. David and Paul dressed up for Halloween. And my brother was always teasing one of the three girls. Here they are again, David and Kay and Connie. Connie was known because she had a little mini bike, so that's Connie driving her mini bike. Kay, Connie, and I always water skied, so here's a picture of us as adults water skiing right out there in the yacht basin in front of our house. And I've got to say one more thing about that picture. And my brother David was always teasing girls, and then when we all had children, he was always teasing them. I found this letter that my brother wrote to my daughter Erin, who's now 45. But at the time she was probably, I don't know, 9 or 10 or 8, I think. It was 1986. This is a pretend note from Santa Claus. Dear Erin, thank you for the letter. I hope you enjoy the gifts I brought you. I was unable to get you the watch at this late date. Be a good girl, and next year I'll bring you some tax-free municipal bonds. Love, David.
Well, Sam.
He was always doing funny things and things like that. So I just had to read that, David, when I found it. I said, oh my God. My dad was in the citrus business. Graduated from Florida. Oh, this is the story I wanted to tell you because I just think it's so poignant about my father. He was a really wonderful man, but hard times came to my grandfather during the Depression. And he could only send my father to school for 1 year. So my father, when he went to the University of Florida, said, I can only go for 1 year. And they said, okay, take whatever you want. So he took all senior level agriculture classes. And at the end thought that was going to be it. But his good friend, Byron Herlong's father, A.S. Herlong Sr., said, you know, I'll pay for your college. And he said, Byron Herlong told me later that he paid for a lot of young men's college in Leesburg, that Sid did. So the next year, Dad goes to the University of Florida and he takes all junior level classes. Well, he's on a roll now, so he goes the third year and takes sophomore classes, and by the time he's a senior, he's taking his freshman classes. He did it all backwards. Years and years later, and of course I didn't know that, but years and years later I went to visit Byron in his later years just to see how he was doing, and he said, I've got to tell you a story about your dad. He said, my dad loaned several young men in town back during the Depression. I loaned them money to go to college. Your dad was the only one that paid all of it back. So it was really heartwarming to hear that my dad did that. And I can believe it, because that's the kind of guy he was. He was in the citrus business. Here he is in one of his orange groves. This is a picture of I took this picture yesterday. This is the house on Main Street that the Barcus family grew up in. This is a sleeping porch upstairs. When I was a kid, we used to love to sleep up there. There's a plaque on the porch now that Southern Monument made for the house. The house was built in 1913. It was the home of H.E. Barcus Sr. and Ollie McAlpin Barcus. These are the children's names. And my Aunt Sarah lived there until she passed away in 2005. This is the house across the street. It's in the process of being painted really bright blue. Yeah. But David and I lived in this house for a couple of years when we were building our house. My Uncle Harry lived in it, and of course my great-grandparents, David and Sally, lived in it. Still there, built in 1924. Santa Claus. We moved into Pelmore Park in 1956, and that year my mother made a Santa Claus outfit and a papier-mâché face for Santa Claus. This is a picture of David and I that year. And I know it was a picture of the year because I wore pigtails. Oops, what did I do?
What do you hit?
I don't know what I'm doing. There we go. I wore pigtails in the second grade. So I'm in the second grade there. It was in kindergarten. And this is the first year we had Santa Claus. You want to tell your story, John?
You can tell us.
mad at me because I don't remember. John, come on.
Come on, John.
Okay.
John's got a quick story to tell about Santa Claus.
Well,
Go ahead
Yeah.
and use the mic, John.
your mother was so sweet. When I was in high school, a couple of guys that I hung around with, I'm not sure if it was Roger Clark, but I think it was Oscar Land and maybe Robert Lowry. We were riding around and saw Santa Claus on Sylvia's front porch, and we decided to take Santa Claus's head. We somehow got caught by somebody in authority, and we all went back and returned Santa Claus to Sylvia with a great deal of apologies and sympathy. And over the years, Sylvia and I have always enjoyed talking about that event, and I've got a picture of the last picture I have with Sylvia and I is with her and Santa Claus on her front porch.
She called you the Santa Slayer.
Seriously. That was probably 4 or 5 years ago. I think you took the picture.
Yeah.
But she was a wonderful lady, and we all enjoyed. I used to give all these little kids a ride on my motorcycle too. All these little girls. Your parents wanted me to do it.
Thanks for sharing, John. Okay, I think this is the last slide. I promise. Okay, that was the first when Santa debuted.
This is when Santa retired. My mother passed away. Here's my mother over here in the corner with the flag sitting on the front porch. Here's Santa Claus on the front porch. And we put a sign up for my mother, Farewell Sylvia. So that was supposed to be the end of Santa Claus. But if you are out on Christmas and ride past our house, Santa sits on my front porch now. So Santa still lives. Yeah. I did that one already, sorry.
That's it.
I think that's it.
Okay, all right. Has everybody got the calculator? Calculator, get it out, because this is it.
Lordy.
Sarah, I lost the bet. Sarah? I lost the bet.
1 hour.
1 hour. Oh, I'm so sorry. I really tried. I really did. Okay, this is what I want to tell you. A lot of the things that I found out about my family, like my grandfather being on my grandmother's side, being a state representative in a town named after him. I mean, I had no idea. So I think it's important that we pass stories on to our children. And if you have children, you need to pass stories on about your life and your stories to them so that those stories can keep going. One of the things I realized about my grandmother, she lived to be 97, was when I calculated it, she lived 50% of the history of the United States. 50% of the, John's looking at me like, what? The United States started in 1776, right? And it is 2024. That is 247 years. You take your calculator right now, and you take your age and divide it by 247, and you will find out what percentage of the life of the United States you have lived so far. And it'll probably be more than that because you're not dead yet. So I think you'll calculate, I did mine, 30%.
Yeah.
30%. 30% of our lives is the history of the United States. So we need to keep that history going. We need to pass on these stories to our children and not let things be forgotten, because that's what history is all about. So in conclusion, thank you for putting up with me for 1 hour. I'm sorry.